Welcome to what is part announcement video and part feedback and suggestions from you all. So, over the course of the CK2 campaign that we've been doing on the channel, I floated the idea a few times of what I've been calling a CK2 Foundation mod. Essentially, a mod of my own making that we can use as a method of adding new content in a unified way, whilst also simultaneously filling in a lot of gaps and adding a few things that Paradox, I think, have left out. It's very fair to say at this stage, the game isn't going anywhere. They're certainly not going to drop another DLC for it. Be very surprised if there is another patch for CK2. So we've got to accept that this is the final product. And I do think, from my perspective as a player who has played it for a very long time, but also as someone who's seen all the total conversions, who has experienced many different mods and permutations of the game itself, going all the way from the Republic back in 2012 or whatever to today, there are a lot of things I think that do still need changing. Another massive aspect of why I want to build a kind of foundational mod is not only to fix what is there and to fill in gaps that have been left and to tidy things up, but also to help reduce load order blow on my side of things. I'm not looking to make, making particular mods redundant or anything like that, but I think there are a lot of mods that do some things really well, and other mods that do very similar things very well, but none that have that kind of good middle ground. And what I'm trying to aim with this is almost a community project, similar to how we did the community traits mod, but a way that we can make a better CK2 experience overall in a unified way. Little hard to describe unless you have kind of a backstory or any experience with modding, but the best example I can think of in the current series is we have a really lightweight, no impact on performance mod that adds quality numbers to artifacts, so you can see at a glance very quickly what quality they are. You can open up the character finder, you can type a 5 in brackets and it'll bring up all the characters with a quality 5 artifact. Similarly, we also have the artifact traits mod that adds traits to characters who have artifacts. The first mod, the issue with that is it only works with vanilla items. Moreover, if those vanilla items are overwritten by another mod, then they just simply won't have that number amended to them, thus defeating the entire point of the mod, right? Similarly, the artifact traits mod can be much heavier on performance by comparison, especially if you're playing with a large artifact mod pack. Not to mention, of course, there are other issues with traits like save game, incompatibility, and that type of thing. And I've got both those mods active in the current series, and neither is a perfect solution to the issue. There are a lot of other kind of concerns as well, but that's just an example of what I'm trying to eliminate, kind of some redundancy there with this mod pack. So what I'm going to be doing is taking my current traits mod and expanding that into a overall game foundation. Now, I put up a video not so long ago going over the details in the fantasy mod that I released. Or not released, but have had in works for a very, very long time. It's been on indefinite hiatus, just trying to decide if there are any features of that worth saving. A lot of people said what it ended up being is a lot of great base game fixes and some good fantasy content, but neither kind of... It didn't make sense to have them both in the same mod, and I do kind of agree. So there were things like the decision icon fixes, the decisions menu just being tidied up in whole, the lodge change from removing the kind of, I would argue, fairly redundant forts in the game and turning them into lodges, a whole new building type, etc., etc. None of that really is a fantasy aspect, but things that could just be added to the base game. Now, another massive part of this is it gives me full control over performance as well. By having a lot of this stuff on toggles and by having a lot of methods of implementing all of these different mods essentially in one big mod. I'm not going to, take anything. I'm going to build it all from scratch based on my own methods. But it would allow people playing on, say, the big example I've got is multiplayer. CK2 multiplayer is fantastic. It's a great way to experience the game. Simultaneously, CK2 multiplayer is the worst thing I've ever played and is incredibly unstable at best. And that's being polite. So having a way to toggle off certain features, not only in the mod itself, but in the base game too, workarounds, methods of gaining back a little bit of performance. So for example, that previously mentioned artifact mod, having the checks on that reduced to something that happens every year, or maybe just even when an artifact is inherited, that will make it a lot more lightweight. That's just an example of a much bigger problem. Now what I'm really here to do is ask any of you if there are, well, anything you can think of really. Now, the big thing I'm trying to consider going into this is ethos, basically, of CK2, is the design of CK2. I want this mod to operate in such a way that you would never know there was a mod active at all. And I actually said this before we started playing RimWorld properly, that the vanilla expanded team on RimWorld have it down because their mods slide into the game in such a way that if you were to give someone RimWorld with all the vanilla expanded mods enabled, they wouldn't bat an eye at it. They would think this is just RimWorld. Whereas if you gave them RimWorld with, say, the Call of Cthulhu mod or the Vampires mod or whatever, they might think this is a little bit strange. You know, is this really part of the game? That's what I'm aiming to do, is to have it so that, you know, when a job is done right, nobody know you will have done anything at all. So to give you an idea of some things that I've already got in the works or I've already done, so how the mod currently stands, and I haven't committed entirely to this idea quite yet. I should point that out. It's obviously going to be a big time investment, but it would help me massively in the future to do it, and I think there will be some interest in something like it. So again, all the decision tab tidying is been ported over from the fantasy mod, adding some employment options to give dedicated characters. Balance is also a massive part of it. Should have really brought that up a second ago. But balance is the key here, and that's the thing I'm really focusing on. I would rather have things overbalanced, by which I mean they are too strictly balanced in that they're of a larger detriment to the player than they are a benefit, than have things underbalanced and exploitable. That is my personal preference on that. You have the convenience of a whole new option. That alone is already far more powerful than anything you've got in the base game, right? So what I've done is I've already added dedicated employment aspects. So in the base game, you can present debutant, right? Fleshing out that system a little bit more would be quite nice. I've added in an adoption mechanic, which Dale, in the main server, shout out to Dale, said, like, I wish there was a way, and a lot of mods have had this. The Elder Kings, for example, I believe, after the end had something similar, if I'm thinking of the right mod. A mechanic whereby you can visit a local orphanage and get a child. Now, I've added that event already into this, so that as long as there are certain very strict conditions, for example, you've got less than 2 children, you have a lot of gold, the amount of gold that you donate can, you know, affect the outcome of the child. The children need to be acceptable, but not necessarily good, and very rarely should they be great. They need to be kind of a last resort type thing. It's all about building a dynasty, right? And if you're just going around adopting children, that kind of undermines the point of the game. Things like that, where these options should be available but not exploitable and fit into that base game balance. So forts being repurposed into lodges is another thing I've added there. Rewriting the entire genetic system so it's more lightweight. This is another example of reducing mod list redundancy. So better genetics is painfully accurate to the point of it almost being overblown. Overblown, is that the right word? Kind of over-encumbering the whole thing. Like, the save game bloat you get from better genetics is absolutely absurd. A more lightweight variant of that where that just applies to, say, the players would be phenomenal. That way you can keep things very lightweight, the player gets the benefit, and emulating certain effects for the AI. That's another big thing I'm doing with this, whereby it looks as if the AI is getting the same outcome for the player, but it's much more simplified and more performance-friendly. That's a big part of it, but I've got some other ideas that have been suggested too, like new bloodlines. I want to kind of do a similar mod to Flogi's tech mod. Flogi's tech mod, very broken. I love the mod, but it is very, very broken. Implementing custom trade routes as well would be quite ideal, but without, like Flogi's tech mod adds a lot of lore changes and retinue changes that for compatibility purposes aren't ideal. You can toggle them off, of course, but I just think that removing them entirely would be more preferable for my type of thing. And that's a big thing that me and Kekfit were talking about. Finding a way to balance the AI, not in the way that in the base game difficulty options, you essentially allow them to cheat, right? Give them bonus fertility, cheaper, you know, armies, more gold, whatever it happens to be. But finding a way to make it so the AI actually feels more alive is very key. So kind of brainstorming, we brainstormed some ideas about how to make it so the AI can build things. Just like build buildings a bit more proactively, invest in their realm a little bit more. You'll frequently see, say, the Byzantine Empire towards the late game sit on thousands of gold, and all of their holdings just not building anything, not doing anything with that gold in a sensible manner. So there's been some talks of how to implement stuff like that. There's a lot going on. It's very, very hard to describe in hindsight without a script what exactly I'm going for here. Now, what I am looking for the entire takeaway from this video is what I'm looking for are suggestions that you think is ultimately missing from the base game right now. Now, I'm not saying we need fantasy elements. Let me be very clear on that. I know a lot of people have been kind of discussing how cool it would be to flesh out the Cthulhu stuff. I do plan on doing that in the fantasy module, which will be an optional extra mod. nothing to do with this. This needs to be purely base game changes, adjustments, things that are convenient. You know, what are mods that you just don't play without that could be turned into a singular mod? And again, all these features need to be toggleable. They all need to be performance friendly. That's a big consideration that I'm going into this with. Is it going to be something that you can enjoy with friends in multiplayer? That's a big part of what I'm doing here. So I will be doing a lot of multiplayer testing with this as well, ideally. Are there things to add in, like fun bloodlines, artifacts, as long as they are historically relevant and also in a design that Paradox themselves might have come up with? That would be quite good. And and even like certain particular game rules, like I floated this idea with Ketfic as well, the idea of being able to, so when you start a game in CK2, not all of the artifacts spawn in, they actually only have a chance to spawn in. Being able to turn on a toggle before the game begins to, say, enable all artifacts to spawn in, or enabling a toggle that turns on Ruler Randomizer. Ruler Randomizer is a mod that I've written for several other total conversion mods. I wrote a version for, oh, what is it called now? The New World Order mod. What was called at the time after the end Old World, which of course they've since changed their name. I wrote a mod for that one, which allows the kind of ruler randomizer aspect, which I did a series on as well. Something to enable that, just in a very lightweight manner, would be kind of fun. So any suggestions that you think will fit into base game, I thought we could use this video as a way for me to be able to come back and constantly reference those suggestions, those ideas, and also it acts as a kind of voting system as well, right? I'd highly encourage you to go into the comments, have a look through what other people have suggested, upvote them if you're interested in them, you know, maybe get into a bit of debate, a bit of feedback there. That'd be fantastic. I will keep a close eye on this if there's enough interest. This will be something I'm happy to double down on. I think I'm done with modding DM for a while. I did the things I wanted to do, like rewrite the engine. That was something that always kind of bothered me, the kind of clunky implementation of that. And we've added a few fun events, you know, it's mostly been Ketfit's work, but since this CK2 series began, we've added Rabies, Indiana Jones, Nazgul, Infinity War, Bovid-19. Ketfit took my Suspicious Towels mod and added that into the Dungeon Master. NFTs, or Inepties as they're called, for whom the Horn dudes. There's so many more features that have just been added in this, I mean, ostensibly short time. It's been, what, like 2 months now? So I think I'm kind of not necessarily burnt out, but I think I'm done with the Dungeon Master for the time being, and I want to move on to a mod that will act as a foundation for me to build every other mod pack and ideally reduce some of that redundancy and implement these ideas half decently. So I'm going to be working with a team in a kind of private Discord. If anybody's up for bug testing or fixes or have any experience with CK2 modding, I'm more than happy to maybe have a chat in the CK2 modding channel in my Discord for adding more people into this other tester server, this closed tester server that I have going with a few other people there. Overall, I just want to kind of make things my own a little bit more. Not necessarily make things my own, but certainly fix things in a way that I see both myself and a lot of my friends and a lot of people subscribe to on Steam, of course, the way they play the game. It'd be nice just to do something with that makes it a more whole experience. And that's all. This was a horrible idea to come in without a script. I think I've redeemed it. So let me know what you think ultimately, and I will see how this goes. And depending on how things align, maybe we'll get something good out of this. Maybe this could be the I'm not necessarily, of course, trying to do anything like CK2+. That would be ridiculous. Crusader Kings II with options might be the way I would describe it. A tool set to make the game better than it has ended up being. Yeah, I quite like that description.